The C tier levels. The moment in a rundown where things start getting quite a bit more challenging and unique when it comes to things like level design and mechanics. I always get fairly excited when I make it to this moment in a brand new rundown because I know that this is where the devs can start really, as they say, pull out all the stops and do their best to try to make the players' lives much more difficult and make the levels a fair amount more complicated. So let's dive into C2 and see what this level in particular has in store for us. Hello everyone, Professor Scaler here, welcoming you to my R7C2 level guide. For this level, I recommend you bring with you a bio tracker, a mine deployer, or a C-foam launcher, depending on whether or not you're doing the optional objectives. And then finally, no matter what type of run you're doing, the third slot's going to be taken up by a burst sentry, and the fourth slot will be taken up by a sniper sentry. The reason for the bio tracker is because in this level, stealth is quite important. Which some of you might be saying, well, Scalar, isn't that true about any level? Which to you I would say, yeah, you are technically correct, but it's a bit more important from this moment on, because like I said, levels are going to start getting a bit more challenging and resources aren't going to be quite as abundant or forgiving as you might be used to them being in some of the previous levels of this rundown. And therefore, we need to make sure that we are knowledgeable people. We have a good idea of how many enemies are in the zone we're about to head into, where they're positioned. Did something wake up, or did you successfully hit that enemy in time to scream cancel it and therefore everything else is asleep? Where are the scouts? How many of them are there? Can you safely go for the kill? A bunch of information that is going to be very important, that way you don't make mistake after mistake after mistake and waste all of your resources, and then yeah, you're surviving now, but you don't have the resources later on for the more difficult parts where you really need them. So bring a bio tracker with you, that way the person with it can gain this information and relay it to the team, and you'll have a bit of a smoother experience. When it comes to the mine deployer or the C-foam launcher, neither of these tools are really that important in this level. They do have a few moments here and there where they do shine, but not enough to the point where they really need tool refill. So I'd say no matter which one of the two you take, do not fill this thing up with tool refill. Maybe put 1 or 2 uses in it if you absolutely have to, but for the most part, all of your tool refill should be going into the sentries. As for which one you're going to want to take, if you're just going for the main objective, I recommend the mine deployer, as it will help you out with some of the alarm sequences in the level, as well as the blood door you have to go through. But if you're going for the optional objectives, take the C-foam launcher, as this will help out a whole lot more, especially when it comes to the extreme and the overload objective. And while a mine or 2 in this level can help out quite a bit, since there are a total of 2 blood doors you have to go through, you can very easily find multiple consumable mines throughout this level, so as long as you keep an eye open, you should be able to find an explosive mine or 2, and you'll be perfectly fine when it does come to those blood doors. And then finally, when it comes to the burst sentry and the sniper sentry, because tool refill is not super abundant in this level, we want a sentry that is fairly effective at killing pretty much any type of enemy. And what better sentry than that than the sniper sentry, especially when combined with biotracker symbiosis. As for why we're not running 2 sniper sentries, instead we're going to have 1 burst sentry as well, that's because we want a sentry that has a high rate of fire and can deal with enemies in larger numbers, which is what the burst sentry does. High rate of fire, and even though it has less damage, it does have a bit of stagger capability to it, so larger waves of it can get caught up a bit by the burst sentry, which has good synergy with the sniper sentry, as it basically keeps those enemies in position and lets the sniper sentry do its job for longer before all the enemies run right past it. Again, most of the tool refill you find in this level should be going into these 2 tools. I would say 9 out of 10 uses should be going into them. And when it comes to what type of sentry, I would say overall try to keep an even 50-50 split, as there will be some moments where we're going to want more sniper than burst, but there'll also be other moments where we want more burst sentry than sniper sentry. So try to keep the tool refill split evenly between these 2, and you should be a-okay. Dropping down into level, you'll see that your main objective is to fix the generator cluster, and in order to do this, you're going to have to bring 6 power cells to it and plug them all in. You'll be starting off inside zone 144, and in here you'll be able to find the extreme bulkhead door as well as the security door to zone 145. However, both of these security doors are under lockdown. The bulkhead door will not be unlocked until you plug all 6 power cells into the generator cluster, and the security door to zone 145 can only be unlocked by using the terminal inside zone 144 with you and use it to reset the air ventilation. But when you do this, a class 6 alarm is going to initiate, where every single scan is a full team scan that will go to the predetermined locations. So before you put the command to the terminal, make sure you grab the resources in here and then set up your sentry, sort of like you can see my team doing. The burst sentry should be the one that's closer towards spawn, as this is the sort of close range high rate of fire sentry, and the sniper sentry could be the one that's positioned closer to the terminal and where you are, since this one can pretty easily snipe any enemy throughout the entire room without really missing a shot or being wasteful. Then once your team is good, you can all stand next to the terminal, put the command in, the first scan will appear, and while you're doing these scans, not only we have to deal with enemies like strikers, shooters, and flyers, as well as the occasional giant striker, but the infectious fog levels in this area are going to start rising up. Thankfully though, this isn't really too much of an issue, as you'll be able to stay above the fog levels as long as you're dealing with the scans quickly and not just dying over and over again, or just simply not hopping onto the scans. So the only real issue it poses is that it can make it a little bit easier for enemies to sneak up on you. But you can also negate this danger by just simply having the person with the biotracker keeping an eye out and making sure they're tagging enemies whenever they can. Once you finish all 6 sets of scans, the enemies will stop spawning, the fog will go back to the normal levels that it was at beforehand, and you'll be able to go back, collect your sentries, and then you can open up the security door to Zone 145. Inside Zone 145, you're going to be able to find a lot of resources spread throughout the room, as well as the generator cluster in the middle of the room. And you'll be able to find 3 more security doors, one to the west, north, and to the east. The one to the north and the east, though, are under lockdown, and we'll have to plug in a certain amount of power cells into them in order to actually go into those doors. So the only place we can really go to is the west. Before we head off in that direction, though, you want to make sure that you grab some of the resources in the middle. You don't really need to grab a whole lot of them, as this is the sort of central main room that you'll be going through multiple times over and over again. So you could leave most of these resources behind, and I actually would recommend that unless you're really short on something, which you honestly shouldn't be by this point in the level, you don't really need to grab anything except for the tool refill. I would highly recommend that you grab all the tool refill from the zone and put it into the 2 sentries, and then once you've done that, you could go to the west of the security door Zone 146. This will just have a full team scan tied to it, and then you can head in. Inside of Zone 146, you're going to be in a very big room, and there are going to be a lot of strikers and shooters in here, but there will be no resources. However, you do need to make sure that you clear out every single one of them, because you will be coming back through here later, so be cautious as you go for the stealth kills, as one unfortunate enemy scream will wake up the entire room. Once you dealt with all of them though, you can keep going through, you'll find the security door Zone 147, and this is just going to be an open security door. Inside Zone 147, it's basically going to be the same thing as 146. Lots of enemies, no resources, although there are multiple rooms, so it's not quite as dangerous. And then when you get to the back end of it, you'll find a security door to Zone 148, which will also just be an open security door. Inside of Zone 148, you'll be able to finally find some resources as well as some fog repellers, which I highly recommend you grab a few stacks of these, because fog repellers are important for pretty much the entirety of this level. Aside from the resources, enemies, and fog repellers, you'll also be able to find 2 more security doors. One to the west, which leads to Zone 149, although the security door is under lockdown until you reset the air ventilation by using the nearby terminal, and a security door to the north, which leads you to Zone 150. However, this security door is unpowered and requires you to plug a power cell into a nearby generator in order to open it up. So after you've dealt with all the enemies inside the zone and collected the resources, you're going to want to set up your defenses, because just like the terminal at the beginning of the level, when you put the command to this one, a class 5 cluster alarm is going to initiate. So let's take a look at a map overlay. As you can see, there's only one location that enemies can possibly spawn from, and you're going to be keeping every single door shut throughout this alarm except for this door right here, which is going to go one of 2 ways. If you're just going for the main objective and therefore have a mine deployer, you can also shut this door and place a mine on it. However, if you're going for the optional objectives and therefore have a C-foam launcher with you, you're going to want to leave it wide open. That way the enemies who do make it past the sentry can just simply walk right on in, and instead of all coming in one big group, they'll sort of just trickle in since they don't have to pile up on the door to break it down. As for your sentries, you're going to be holding onto the burst sentry as it's not really needed during this alarm, but you are going to place a sniper sentry down just like you can see me and my team doing in the background footage. This is a very good spot for it, as every single enemy will have to go through its line of fire in order to get into your room, and if you have the person with the biotracker stay near the entrance to your room, that way they can tag the enemies, the biotracker will be even more efficient as it will fire faster and it will have a reduction in the amount of ammunition it spends, which means even fewer enemies will actually make it into the room to attack you. Even then though, some of the enemies will make it through, so make sure that while you're working on the scans, you keep an eye or an ear out for the enemies, that way nothing just sneaks in and gets a cheeky hit on you just because you're not paying too much attention. But once you have everything set up, you can put the command to the terminal, do the full team scan, and then the 4 sets of cluster scans afterwards. And then once you finish every single one of the scans, you're going to want to move very quickly. Because once the scan is finished, the infectious fog levels in this area are going to be rising once again. So you're going to want to go into Zone 149, or at least 2 people on your team are going to want to go in there and grab the power cells from in there, while the other 2 people go out and finish off any of the enemies that are still alive, as well as pick up that sniper sentry. then you're going to do one or two things depending on what type of player you are. If you're going for just a main objective, you just simply have to carry those 2 power cells all the way back to zone 145 and plug them into the generator cluster. This will cause the infectious fog levels to return back to their normal height, and you don't have to worry about it for the time being. However, if you are going for the optional objectives, one person is going to carry one of the power cells all the way back to the generator cluster and plug it in and then stay in that zone, while the other 3 people are going to go to the northern room inside of zone 148, and they're going to plug that power cell into the generator and unlock the security door to zone 150. Then they are going to head into zone 150 and deal with the enemies as well as the scout or 2 scouts, I believe, that usually spawn in there, and then find the power cell as fast as they can. Then once you have that power cell, that one person is going to go all the way back to zone 145 and plug their power cell into the generator cluster to cause the fog levels to lower. Meanwhile, the other 2 people who are inside zone 150 are just going to stick to the high ground, that way they don't gain a ton of infection. The downside to this is the one person who has to carry the second cell back is basically guaranteed to get 100% infection on their way back since they can't run with the power cell. But don't worry too much about it. I believe there is usually a 2 or 3 use disinfectant stick or a pack inside zone 150, so they could just simply backtrack, go into 150, grab that and then use it, and then you can also grab the other resources inside of here. If you're wondering why we had to open up the zone though, well, that's because there's also a bulkhead key inside the zone, which is actually the only bulkhead key in the entire level, and we're going to need this in order to do the overload objective. So once you've backtracked into zone 150, you've collected the bulkhead key as well as any other resources you want, you can then backtrack once more and go all the way to zone 145 and then go to the northern end of it to the security door to zone 151, which has now been unlocked. This security door just simply having a checkpoint scan tied to it. Zone 151 doesn't really have anything I need to take note of, so we're going to skip through it to the back end, where we'll find the security door to zone 152, which is going to be a blood door. If you have a mine deployer or just simply an explosive mine, you can make this door very easy to deal with. However, if that is not the case and you have the C4 launcher and you haven't found a single explosive mine, you're just going to have to deal with every single enemy the old-fashioned way, which is just simply shooting them or plopping down your sentries and letting them do some of the work. Once you deal with the blood door though, you can head to zone 152. In here, you'll be able to find the bulkhead door control and the door to the overload objective. However, you don't want to deal with these yet whatsoever, because also in the zone, you'll be able to find the security door to zone 153. This security door is under lockdown though, and you have to reset the air ventilation by using the nearby terminal. I really hope by this point you're starting to see a pattern in this level. And just like before, when you put that command to the terminal, it's going to cause a class 5 mixed alarm to initiate. So we don't want to open up the overload bulkhead door, that way we don't have an extra spawn location for these enemies. Speaking of spawn locations though, let's take a look at the map overlay. As you can see, there's only one location that these enemies can spawn from, and every single door is going to be left shut, except for this door right here, or at least maybe, depending on your situation. If you are doing just a main objective and therefore have the mine deploy with you, you're going to want to keep that door shut and place a mine on it, and then just simply place on your sentries like you'll be able to see me and my team doing the background footage in a moment or two here. However, if you are doing the optional objectives and therefore you have a C-foam launcher, you want to leave the door open, because as you can see now, we're going to have both of the sentries inside the room with us facing towards that door. So if we're not placing a mine on it, we don't want to shut the door because then a bunch of enemies pile up on it, and then when they do break it down, the sentries just aren't going to be able to handle all of them since they're all there right at the same time, and a lot of the enemies are going to very easily get through them. So we leave it open, that way they come in as a trickle and the sentries have an easier time dealing with them. As for the rest of our team, we're just focusing on the scans. It's going to be a mix of big red scans and full team scans. Biotracker, try to tag the enemies as often as you can, that way Biotracker Symbiosis does benefit the sniper sentry a little bit when it can. That or just simply it allows your teammates to see where the enemies are in this very dark room and they can more easily shoot at them. Once you finish every single one of the scans though, just like before, the infectious fog level is going to start rising up, but there's also going to be an error alarm thrown into the mix. However, this error alarm seems to be a little bit weird. It doesn't spawn in a set amount of enemies every set amount of seconds like most other error alarms do, but rather it sort of just tries to keep a constant amount of enemies alive. From my experience, it will spawn in about 6 total enemies, and then once you kill off a few of them, it will then spawn in some more to replace them. And if you keep those 6 enemies alive, then it seems to not really spawn anything in, or at least it doesn't spawn anything in for the first minute or two. Maybe it will a little bit later. I didn't do a whole lot of extensive testing with it. So what your team is going to want to do is don't go back down and grab the sentries or deal with the rest of the enemies that are still alive, but rather go to the northeast, go through that door and get into the eastern room, and then go to the security door to zone 153. This will just be an open security door because you've unlocked it. 2 people are going to head in and grab the power cells from the side, while the other 2 people are dealing with any of the enemies that are still alive from the alarm or the error alarm enemies that are spawning in. Then once they get the power cells, all 4 of you are going to go back together to zone 145 as a team, 2 people killing, 2 people holding onto the cells, and you're going to plug both of them in. As long as you're being somewhat efficient and quick, you should get back before the infectious fog rises up too much, so you won't be gaining that much infection across your team. Once you plug in both of the power cells, the infectious fog will start lowering once again, and the error alarm will be deactivated. And then once you've done all that, you can make your way back to Zone 152 because your business up there isn't quite finished. Now we're going to be opening up the overload bulkhead door to Zone 302 and heading in, because we want to take care of at least the first half of it before we continue on with the rest of the main objective. Obviously, if you're just doing the main objective, this does not apply to you. But upon entering into Zone 302, you'll see that your overload objective is to collect 3 OSIPs and then just go back to the extraction point. However, these OSIPs are going to be inside of Zone 303, not 302, and you'll see why that's a problem in a minute. Because inside Zone 302, there are going to be a lot of enemies, chargers, giant chargers, as well as charger scouts. And this zone only consists of 2 rooms, and both rooms are connected with an open room divider. So if you end up shooting your guns in the first room of Zone 302, you're going to wake up some of the enemies that are also in the second room. So be very careful when going through here. If there's a charger scout in the first room, try to deal with it. This is where the C-foam is going to be coming in handy. However, if there are no charger scouts in the first room, but there are a lot of chargers and giant chargers, you can go outside the bulkhead door, shoot your gun to alert some of them, and then you just fall back a bit and let them come to you. Then once you deal with the entirety of the first room, you can make your way into the second room, which is the big donut room, and this one is a whole lot easier to deal with. Go throughout here, killing out enemy one by one, use the C-foam launcher on the charger scouts if you want to make it easier, and once you clear out this entire zone, you can start collecting some of the resources. Things like tool refill and ammo packs you can grab, but I recommend med packs and disinfectant packs you just simply leave here instead. Because something else you might notice while you're looking around is that there is a security door to Zone 303, but it is unpowered and requires you to plug a power cell into the nearby generator in order to open it up. And spoiler alert, this security door is going to have a pretty nasty alarm tied to it, and we're also going to have to deal with this alarm while this entire room is covered in infectious fog. So we want to leave med packs and disinfectant packs in here, as well as fog repellers if we can. That way when we come back later, we have a better chance of surviving and we're all not just stuck on 1% HP while we're dealing with the alarm. Other than that though, there's not really anything left to do inside Zone 302 because we can't get any OSIPs and we can't progress any further. So once we've dealt with all of our business in here, we're going to backtrack to Zone 145 again, and then we're going to head to the eastern side of it where we'll find the security door to Zone 154. This just being a simple checkpoint scan. Aside from the scout and the fair amount of giant strikers and hybrids, there's not really a whole lot I need to take note of when it comes to Zone 154. So we're going to move to the far eastern side of it where we find the security door to Zone 155, this just being an open security door. And inside Zone 155, there will be a whole lot of regular strikers and shooters as well as a few hybrids sometimes. So be a bit cautious as this is one big room with multiple elevations to it, and if a single enemy screams, the entire room is going to wake up. If you don't feel comfortable in trying to stealth clear the zone, you could just simply pull it and fall back into Zone 154 and fight them out there in the light. But once you dealt with every single one of them, you could go in and you'll find 3 more security doors. One to Zone 156, one to Zone 157, and one to Zone 158. However, every single one of these security doors is going to be under lockdown, which if you played GTFO for a while, you can probably guess what's about to happen. Because when you go to the top of the room and you put that command into the terminal, it is going to cause a full zone alarm to initiate, and the security doors to the north and the south, 156 and 157, are going to open up. And then enemies can spawn from either the north, the south, or the west, but they spawn one room away from you, which means you cannot take advantage of the 2 doors to the west back out in Zone 154. So mines and C-foam are not all that useful here. But that's okay, because hey, we're going to take advantage of enemy pathing and sentries to make this a whole lot easier for us and our team. So as you can see with my team doing, we're holding out up above on the catwalks. We have one sentry facing down one route, and the other sentry facing down the other route. That way, no matter what route enemies take to get to us, they have to go through the line of fire of a sentry. Something to take note of though is while you are dealing with this full zone alarm, fog is going to start rising almost immediately. And for the first half of it, it's going to be going from the ground floor and rising upwards, but for the second half of it, it's going to reverse, and it's going to be going from the ceiling, and it's going to be making its way down to the floor. So you are going to have to throw a few fog repellers during this alarm, that way you don't gain a lot of infection right here now. But once you have finished the alarm and the scan goes away, you're just going to deal with the last few enemies that are still alive, pack up your sentries, and then make your way to the eastern side of the zone where you find the security door at 158, which will now be unlocked, and you're going to go in, grab the 2 power cells, and then make your way back to the generator cluster in Zone 145. If you're just going for the main objective, you're going to plug in both of these power cells right now, that way the whole rising fog mechanic stops and you don't have to worry about it and gain a ton of infection. However, if you are not going for just the main objective, but you're also going for extreme and overload, you're not going to plug in either of these power cells yet, because there is a glitch that is associated with plugging one power cell in. I know a lot of people out there in the community thinks that plugging the 5th cell in is supposed to lower the fog levels and return everything back to normal, but that is actually not the case. That is a checkpoint bug, and while you can definitely do it and get away with it if you want, if that's just how you want to get your completion, if you want to do it sort of the true, legitimate way, you do not want to plug that 5th power cell in. Don't get me wrong, by the way, I'm not judging anybody who does that. I just want to clarify that this is actually a glitch and it's not the intended way. That way people are aware of that fact. So instead, what you're going to want to ideally do if you are going for the optional objectives is place the 5th power cell near the generator but not in it, and you're going to take the 6th one and you're going to head back up north to the overload objective sector and go into zone 302. Then you're going to plug that power cell into the generator up there, which will unlock that security door. The thing is though, by this point, everybody on your team is going to be coughing in a lot of infectious fog because this entire sector will be completely covered by it, which means at this point everybody is at 100% infection, which is going to make the upcoming Class 6 mixed alarm that's tied to the security door zone 303 a bit more difficult. And to make things even worse, the only enemies that spawn in during this alarm are flyers and armored flyers. And to make it even more so worse, they don't spawn 2 rooms away. They only spawn 1 room away. So what I recommend you do is when you make your way back and plug the power cell in, you're going to want to throw a few fog repels throughout the room, and you're not going to want to disinfect your team, but rather you're just going to want to heal up like crazy. Because yes, you are going to lose this health to the infection, but it does take a while for infection to actually start chipping away your HP. So if you heal everybody up to 60 or even 80%, you can very easily complete this entire Class 6 alarm before the infection even takes away, I'd say, even half of that HP. So really the only thing you're going to lose a lot of HP to would just be the flyers and the armored flyers. So once you've thrown your fog repellers and you've overhealed a bit, pull the alarm door, get to work on it. You could place your sentries down in the room somewhere. There aren't really a whole lot of great spots for it as the flyers are going to be up above and the sentries don't really have an easy time looking up there, but you could place it on one of the elevated platforms near you, and you're just going to get to work on the scans. Make sure you're dealing with the flyers, that way they don't overwhelm you completely, but also make sure you're prioritizing scans as there will be cluster scans and full team scans throughout this alarm, so you've got to make sure everybody stays alive. And once you finish every single one of the scans, you can focus on killing the rest of the flyers. And then once they're all dead, you can pack up your sentries, and then you can either all go into zone 303 together as a team, or you can split up. When I first did this, we had 2 people go in and 2 people stay in the generator cluster room above the infectious fog levels. That way if something went wrong and the people in 303 died, we outside would be able to disinfect and heal up and deal with the enemies coming after us. But this isn't necessary, it's more so just up to you and your team. At this point, the only thing you really need to worry about is either waking up the Chargers, Giant Chargers, or Charger Scouts in 303, or unfortunately and embarrassingly die to a spitter because you're stuck at 1% HP because of the infection. As for Zone 303 itself, in here you'll be able to find 3 OSIPs, or actually there's a total of 5 OSIPs, but you only need 3 to complete the overall objective. As I mentioned, there will be Chargers, Giant Chargers, Charger Scouts, and Spitters all throughout the zone. But if the first room doesn't have a single Charger Scout in it, you kind of just stealth kill all the enemies with the regular Chargers, or you can just, together as a team, hold the room and fall back and let them come to you. Just, again, be cautious as a Giant Charger. Tongue attack can hit you from a pretty fair or a long distance. But once you dealt with the first room, you got through it, you can make your way into the second room. Follow the path I'm taking, as the power cell will always be in the second room down below. This is the only spot it can spawn in. Grab that power cell, and once you have it, you're going to want to make your way back to the generator cluster room, plug that in along with the 5th cell you have, and this will cause all the fog in the level to lower. Upon doing so as well, a blackout will occur, although the lights will come back on just a few seconds later, and then a full team scan will appear next to the generator cluster. But if you're still going for the overall objective, you do not want to finish this scan yet. Instead, you're going to want to use the disinfectant packs that are inside the room with you to fully disinfect your team, heal up a bit, then make your way back to Zone 303 and continue going throughout it to collect the last 3 OSIPs that you need. Once you have all 3 of them, you can either go for any of the resources that are still left in the zone, or if you'd rather not risk it because a lot of the enemies are still left alive, you could just leave the zone and then make your way back to Zone 145 and then hop into the full team scan that is next to Generator Cluster. Once you finish that full team scan, your main objective is completed, although you are not quite done yet. Shortly after you finish that Generator Cluster full team scan, you and your team are going to be teleported out to the Desert Realm, and out here you have one simple goal, and that's not necessarily to survive, but rather make it to the structure that you can see way off in the distance and get to the terminal that's at it and put a specific command into it. I don't remember the exact name of the command, but I know the first word is copy, so if you just type in COP, hit tab, it will auto-complete it, and then you could just simply hit enter. The thing is though, this is easier said than done, because while you're making your way to that terminal, things like strikers, shooters, giant strikers, flyers, and armored flyers are going to be spawning in and chasing you down. And that is a very long distance that you have to cover between where you get teleported in at and where that structure is. So before you finish the full team scan in the generator cluster room, make sure that everybody's pulse is low, somewhere from like 68 to 73 or somewhere in that range. That way, once you get teleported out, you could just book it as fast as you can and make as much distance as you possibly can before you start slowing down. But once you notice your pulse getting around 111, 120, or 130, it would be a good idea that 2 or maybe 3 people on your team sort of turn around and try to focus on the enemies that are chasing them down and thinning their numbers a bit, while the other 1 or 2 people just continue going towards that terminal and make it there as fast as they can. Once you hop on the terminal, just type in COP, hit tab to autocomplete it, hit enter, and this will cause a full team scan to appear. But don't worry, you don't actually have to do this full team scan. About 1 to 2 seconds after the scan appears, your entire team will be teleported back to the complex, so even if only 1 person is still left alive, you will be fine. You can quickly revive the people who did get downed, and then you could do 1 or 2 things. If you're just going for the main objective, you don't need to do anything else. You could just simply head back to the extraction point inside zone 144, hop on extraction, and then you're done. This is a silent extraction. It does take a little bit of time to complete, but no enemies are going to be spawning in. But if you are going for the extreme objective, there's still a little bit left for us to do. So we're going to head into zone 144 and then go to the extreme bulkhead door that takes us to zone 289. Once we open it up, we're going to head inside the zone. In here, there will never be any resources, just the matter wave teleportation pad. But at the back end of the room, we can find the security doors on 290, which is going to have a checkpoint scan tied to it. 290 will have resources in it, as well as regular strikers and shooters, as well as even baby strikers, so be a bit cautious of them, as a lot of baby strikers all chasing you down at once can chip away your HP very, very quickly. But as you clear out this entire zone, make your way to the back end of it, you'll find the security door to zone 291. And this security door is going to be a blood door that is going to be spawning in baby strikers, and a pretty fair amount of them, as well as a singular birther. Which, if you have a mine deployer, this makes it a little bit easier to do, but like I said, you don't really want a mine deployer for the optional objective. Instead, there's something we could do with Seafoam that can actually make this blood door pretty easy to deal with. So what you're going to want to do is what you can see my team doing. I'm going to place a lot of Seafoam all over the floor. My teammate is going to place a burst sentry behind the Seafoam facing towards that door, specifically the burst sentry, as we want a higher rate of fire sentry to deal with the baby strikers really quickly. And then we're just going to hide further behind that Seafoam around the corner. This will make it so that all the enemies will come chasing out after us. The babies will get stuck in the Seafoam and they'll just get picked off by the burst sentry very quickly. And then that birther is going to do 1 or 2 things. Either she's going to chill in the back because of the sentry and she's not going to rush us down until she's the only thing left, in which case we could just simply either fall back even further and shut the door behind us. That way she'll come towards us, and then when she gets near the door, we open it up and rush her. Or she's going to do what she did in my team and pull a fast one and just immediately rush us when none of us were expecting it. But thankfully, I can warn you, so you will expect it. So what you should do is, right as you open up the blood door, throw a fog repeller down in front of you. That way, if she does rush you, you could just quickly kill her. 1 or 2 people focus on the babies she'll spawn in, while the other people focus on shooting the tumors, and the fog repeller will prevent her from really fogging up the area. And then that burst sentry will just deal with any of the babies that are still alive from the blood door, so you don't really have to worry about them coming up and trying to kill you. But once the birther is dead and all the other baby strikers are dead, you can head into zone 291. In here, there'll be more resources, as well as the matter wave projector that you need. Once you have that, you're going to want to head back into zone 289, plug that into the teleportation pad, and this will cause a full team scan to appear. Once you finish that, you'll be teleported back out to the desert realm. This time though, no enemies are going to be spawning in right away, so you can take all the time you want to explore the scenery and make your way back to that terminal. When you make it to the terminal, the full team scan will be there, and when you finish that full team scan, it's going to cause a class 5 alarm to initiate, and the only enemy that's going to be spawning in during this alarm are going to be regular flyers, which overall really isn't too difficult as long as you don't let them pile up a lot. The waves themselves only spawn in I think around 5 or 6 per, so you can very quickly deal with them if you're a good shot. So just make sure you're dealing with the flyers, maybe 2 people focus specifically on flyers and 2 people focus on scans, or all 4 of you could be on scans, up to you and your team. But once you finish all 5 sets of scans, you'll be teleported back to the complex, and your extreme objective will be completed. You could then just make your way back into zone 144, go to the extraction scan, hop on in, and once that scan gets up to 100%, you are done and you have beaten R7C2. And that's all there really is to it. R7C2 at first seems to be a fairly complicated with all the fog raising and lowering mechanics, along with how the optional objectives tie into the flow of the level. But overall, it's not too bad once you've got a solid strategy down. There's a lot of stealthing in it, which feels a bit more stressful since resources aren't quite as abundant as they are in previous levels, but hey, stealth is a necessary skill to have in order to survive down here, I guess. As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope that I was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this level. If you have any tips or tricks for this level that you want to share, any questions for me, or you just have something in general that you want to say, please let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me and help me out, and if you want to join the community I'm building, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other cool links. Among those links being one that will take you to the official GTFO merch store, which I highly recommend you check out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast. Hashtag I am not sponsored. Until next time, don't forget that sometimes the most optimal strategies for a level require a bit of thinking outside of the box, and I will see you all in the next video.